Well, welcome everyone. Here we are, the last Friday in February. And just to tempt us along, we thought we had spring flowers because at Manor Road on the south wall, the hyacinth and some of the tulips and even the chrysanthemums were coming back, and they're maybe a few centimeters tall. But they said, oh, not yet. So they tucked back in the ground and snow covered as a new blanket. There you go. And so we're not sure what weather will emerge in this month of February. We all want spring to come, but someone said the groundhog did see their supposedly promised early spring. I think we need to give them a pink slip and hire a new groundhog because they didn't quite get their job description proper. Definitely. That's good. And over to Susan Johnson, who will bring greetings.
Mm-hmm. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Alydia Smith, who, among many things, is an incredibly talented seamstress, knitter, crafter, just you name it. It seems like she and her mother can do it. They've come up with some amazing things. So we're looking forward to her talking about that. Doctor?
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to talk about crafting because it's my favorite thing to do. And it's a tradition that's definitely run in the family. One of my earliest memories is of summers when I was younger. I would often go and spend a week with my grandma, and every time I go and spend time with my grandma, she'd teach me a new craft. So when I was younger, she would teach me like tie-dye 101 or leather working or macrame or knitting, and we learned something new every time. And my grandma was a completely resourceful woman, and she would always go to Honest Ed's, buy a bunch of things, repurpose them, and sell them to tourists. And I would help. And my mom was also, of course, learned all these crafty things too, so she would help. And we always had I was raised with this idea of if you don't have it, make it. And if you don't know how to make it, learn, figure it out, play with it. So the creative spirit was always there to help us learn how to create and make things. And I find that has been truly helpful in all areas of my life, really, this kind of resourcefulness and creative spirit. And I've always tried to share it, particularly when working with youth and younger people. So one of my major projects on top of like the crafting that we do on the regular, which I'll talk about a little bit more, like the sort of crafting that we do on the regular. One of the major projects that I've been working on is sharing my love of crafting with others, and particularly with young people, and to think about how we can share crafting in a way that isn't gendered and helps people learn about those kind of life skills that are involved in crafting. I have so one of the ways that I'm doing that is a friend and myself, we got stopped by COVID, but we're working on we had started before COVID of going into Spark groups and different settings like that to teach children and younger people about our kind of mandate of crafting and like why we craft and how we like to create crafter pieces and what that means for us. And one of the ways that we frame that is with our rule of crafting. And I'll explain to you what our rule of crafting is. I was just gonna pull it up here. Oops, sorry, I had it open and then I closed it for some reason. And now I can't find it. 1 second, sorry. So our basic rule of crafting, it's an acronym. And when I think of crafting, what we are trying to encourage with younger people, but really with all people, is to create a crafter piece. And a crafter piece is our creative way of saying a creative masterpiece that is unique to you. Only you could make it. There's only one in the world. No matter what it looks like, it's a crafter piece if it's completely unique to you and it follows our crafter and it follows the crafter piece rule. So Jess and I, when we do presentations with children or youth, we're trying to encourage folks to not judge their creative work by how beautiful it is, although we have created some pretty beautiful things over the years, but that's not how we judge our work and whether we're proud of it. Rather, we judge our work by how well it fits within our crafter piece rule. And the crafter piece rule is 4 parts. The first is resourcefulness. So, have you been resourceful in the creation of this work? Did you use what you have? Did you problem solve and think of your desired result and make it happen? So, how resourceful were you with this crafter piece that you created? How is your piece one of a kind? So the second one, so the first R is resourcefulness, the U is rule. So how is your piece one of a kind and unique to you and your creation? Does it celebrate something that's really special about you? Did you discover something new while creating it? And did that piece help you to express yourself in some way? The third piece is loving. So, what sort of energy did you put into creating your creation? Were you kind to yourself and to others and to all creators while creating it? And this is a really important one. Like when you were creating it, were you kind to yourself? So were you, instead of being like, oh, I'm not a good drawer, I can't do drawing, that's not my strength, were you supportive and encouraging to yourself? I'm going to try it anyway. I'm going to give this a go. Let's see what happens. I think of, for myself, often quilting has been my new endeavor, and it's not new. I've quilted many times before, but for various reasons, I've been creating a lot of quilts lately. And one of the ways I model being loving to myself in it is, in my house, I'm notorious for not sewing in a straight line. Like I do nothing straight. So quilting in some ways can be very forgiving because you can cut off the sides, but practicing putting good energy into it is me practicing being kind to myself when I like press too hard on the pedal or go sideways, and like being like, oh, let's try again, or ooh, look at you, you got that row straight, as opposed to being, I don't know why, I've been sewing for so many years and I can't get a straight line. Like the way I talk to myself and how I change that language. Loving can also be, how do you treat yourself when something does not go as planned? So instead of being down on myself or being like, oh my goodness, that didn't work out, what is wrong with me? I'm more like, oh, well, why didn't that work out? What could I have done differently? I wonder if the lighting is off. I wonder if I'm a little bit too heavy-handed. I wonder if I had a better grip, if that might help me. And then did you put the love and joy into it that you hope others will feel when they receive it? That's a really important one. Particularly in my household, we have a rule with food that if it's not made with love, it's not going to taste good. And we know it. So then yesterday, the couple days ago, my dad was like hugging my mom, and which they're not really affectionate people, and then my mom was like, what are you doing? He was like, the food doesn't taste good, so you need some more love. I'm doing it to make better food. So this idea of putting the energy in that you hope someone will receive when they get it is really important to us. So is it loving? So far we've gone through 3: resourceful, unique, loving. The fourth rule for a crafter piece is effort. So how much effort did you put into your creation? And are you trying to practice and learn a new skill? Was there a time in the creation process, in the creation, where you had an opportunity to learn from a mistake? Effort is really important, and something that is done with great effort is greatly valued and cherished. And realizing that for some, it's more effort than others. My sister, who is another part of our crafter piece community, is a very good visual artist, and she has amazing penmanship. So she can do calligraphy kind of freehand. Like, she'll just like write it and it'll look like a beautiful font. If I'm doing that, I literally trace what she's done, or I do a lot of fake calligraphy. So I write it out and then I make it look like downward strokes and upward strokes afterwards, because I'm not as I don't have the same eye that she does for it. So it might take me more effort to do a beautiful kind of calligraphy art piece. So we appreciate that we appreciate that more, and we practice it. Part of the thing about crafter pieces is that we try to do things that stretch us as well and go outside of the box in some ways. So that's kind of our crafter piece rule. We're constantly trying to remind each other that we don't have to be great at everything, and that it takes real guts and real courage to do things and to try things that you aren't very good at. Like, it takes guts to like take a risk on something knowing that it might taste like crap, or you might invent something new. And I think it's important to realize that some of the crafter pieces that I have been most proud of might not be the prettiest things that we've created, but they're the things that remind me most of the crafter piece rule, or that have been the most loving things. Like, so for instance, I'm wearing this necklace here, and this necklace my sister, my mom, and myself created one Christmas during one of our crafter piece sessions. So me and my friends like to have crafternoons, and we like to have like crafting times. So one day we had a lot of buttons left over, so we each decided to figure out some fun things to do with buttons. We used to do like button crafts before, and we like just worked with what we had. We were cleaning out one of our crafting bins, and we organized the buttons and we created something fun with it. So we're being resourceful. We were looking at things that we already had lying around. We had a lot of beads lying around. We had a lot of wire lying around. We were being unique because these are just like remnants. We don't have duplicates of any of these buttons. They're just things that were left from sewing projects and other things. The loving piece, I think, for me, was that we were doing it in community, that like I was doing it with my mom, my sister. We have memories making it together, and we were just having fun and trying different things out. And the effort was, we each had different skill sets going on there. So my sister's an excellent bead worker too. My sister's kind of like the fine tooth comb person. Like, so she's the one who's like doing all the like things that I might not necessarily have the patience for. And so she's great with beadwork. So she kind of did the beading for it. And my mom is really good with sewing and sorting, so she was able to kind of do the sorting, and I was able to do like the kind of piecing together. So we're able to play to our strengths, but to work together in the process. So that's basically how we go about our creative endeavors, and then it takes us into many different places. Of course, my sister, my mom, and my grandma and myself, who are kind of like the craftsmiths, that's not the rule that we go by, but this is the rule that I often share when teaching a craft to a group of youth or other folks, to free us to have fun and to see where, I wouldn't say in some settings the spirit, but really that's what I'm saying, to see where the spirit leads us, like to have fun and to express yourself and to celebrate the uniqueness of what you're creating. And sometimes the most beautiful, gorgeous things come out of that. So that's really where we're going with the crafter piece. Like we got into felting completely by accident, and then we just started trying out and testing different things, like this little bamboo plant we made. And it was really by trial and error and what we had in the house, like the pieces of green that we had. And we got some rocks from outside to put in the bottom. We used like toothpicks and chopsticks to get some of the batting up there, but it was a real fun creative endeavor. And then from that, we went to other house plants. Like we had started with cactuses because cactuses was a cute crafting thing, and then we like got other craft plants that we were like, oh well, I'm not good at keeping them alive, so we might as well make a felt one. And what we did here was we put a wire inside so that we could fold it more naturally to make it look more like an actual plant, and then put some weights in the bottom of the pot so that it felt a little bit heavier. But we often kind of go where the spirit leads us and create what we feel like creating, which is part of the reason why my mom, my sister, myself haven't necessarily monetized some of the things that we do, because we don't often stay long in one area. So I remember my sister, when she was on maternity leave with her first child, didn't want to go back to work right away. So she started doing wedding jewelry and wedding tiaras and stuff, because there was a market and people would buy it, and people pay a lot of money for wedding things. So it was helpful. So we helped with the kind of jewelry business for a little bit, because that worked really well. And then there was a time when she was doing wedding decorating. So we would kind of all work together to do wedding decorating things. My mom does a lot of catering, particularly when I was younger. So we did a lot of catering and a lot of food endeavors. My mom is a registered nutritionist and also a food handler. So the food pieces were kind of easy to get into because we're already there, and it's fun to be creative with things like that. And then we started to do craft shows because they were fun. And we had a bunch of leftover jewelry when my sister stopped doing the jewelry. And then my mom has a whole bunch of sewing that she likes to do. So we got into the sewing. And then we started to do like things that we thought would be helpful for people at craft shows, or that we started doing. So my sister got into making cards. So we started to sell cards, and my nephews are really good at making cards. So you're really good at making cards. I love the cards. So we started to do things like that. And really it's whatever's excited us and gotten us thinking, oh, that's fun, or oh, that's sweet. As soon as we make it and we love it, we want to share it. And then we share it with others. So that's really what gets us going or started, is often a need or an inspiration, and then a desire to share it with others. So a lot of our Christmas baking is sheerly for the fact that it brings joy and it's a lot of fun. Like, so it's something that we love to do in our house, so why not share it with other folks and spread some love that way. And then oftentimes when we're doing craft shows, we are a little bit strategic and do on bulk things that we know will sell. So we kind of do on bulk like cookies or cards or things that we know that people will need. And then it gives us a chance to share some of our own crafter pieces, the things that we love or that are completely unique to us. The other thing that I think is often really exciting about doing crafter pieces, particularly with the craftsmiths, which is my sister, my mom, and myself, and sometimes my nephews, is that we never follow scripts. Like, we never follow recipes, we never follow patterns. I don't know why we always make life hard for ourselves, but we truly make unique things every time. Like, obviously we have recipes that are in our head, and we keep those recipes in our head. Like, I have a basic gingerbread, I have a basic sugar recipe, I have a basic chocolate chip recipe. But because we know the basics, we can play around with it in many different ways. So we really are all about creating uniqueness. And then sometimes we get attached to our unique things, so we name them. And then sometimes we sell them with a name. So like we used to sell little felty animals, and we would name each of them because they each had a unique little spirit as we were creating them, which is really fun because they're all different, and we follow a pattern, but not in a traditional sense. And we play off of each other's strengths and encourage each other in the things that we're not so good at. So even when I was younger, for instance, I remember when I was a kid, we always made all the decorations on our Christmas tree. And one year we made, well, for multiple years, we used to make macaroni angels. And my mom and my sister would take a pin and like glue each piece of like those little macaronis for the hair and make little intricate hairstyles with the macaroni on their hair. And I would just dip the head in the glue and then dip it in the hair. And my mom and my sister always put my ornaments close to the top, and they would tell me because it's closer to heaven, but really it was because no one can see the tops from up there, like, and that it wasn't as nice and meticulous as theirs. But the fact that no matter how good or not good, everyone's work was always displayed and and shared has always stuck with me as something that's important and part of kind of the crafterpiece vision of things. I'll stop for a second there just to see if there are any questions or wonderings or.
I'm going to jump in and say a question. You are absolutely remarkable to do recipes from memory. I would say I wouldn't be so. If I tried some of those things, they would make bricks and.
It's all about knowing the basics. Like it's ironic that every Christmas we make some of the same cookies, but we always try something new with our recipe. So like I'll look at the ones I wrote out from the year before, and then I'll write out something new based on, you know, the season, how I thought the texture was. Like we're always adapting and changing. And then my mom really astonishes me because she has most of the ratios just in her head. So she knows that if there's 4 cups of a starch, you're probably going to need about a pound of a fat. And like,
really?
Wow. She has those ratios down pat. So it's hard to mess it up, which makes it really fun to experiment. Which, don't get me wrong, we mess up all the time, but it's always a learning experiment that like, oh, well, this flour is a lighter density, so we really need to add more leavening agent to that to make it work. And it's really cool. And then sometimes we make something that's like amazing, and then we forget to write it down the next day.
Whoa. So do other people have some questions?
Hi, Lydia. It's May here.
Hey, May.
Hello,
I made
Miss
it
May.
in.
How are you?
I love how you challenge yourself, but I'm one of these people. I have to follow a pattern, and I follow it to a T. And the baking, like I have a few favorites, and I just stick to that. Like no deviation from the recipe, none whatsoever. If it works, just let it be. If it's not broken, don't not try to fix it. Right?
You know, the thing though is that if you have a basic recipe that you love, I bet you that there are some things that you do in making that recipe that would be different from others. Like how
I talk to it.
Well, there you go. Like that's very, very, very true. Like the love that you put into it, I 100% believe comes out in the end product. Like sometimes I talk to my batters too, and And sometimes I even like give them a little prayer. Like if I'm making something for like a group, I'll be like, oh, please nourish the bodies. Please help. Like I literally put it in the oven with a little blessing as I let it bake.
So you let out the secret now, Lydia. Okay.
Yeah. Like I just give it all the love I possibly can. And I just like and then if it totally messes up, I often just put it in the freezer. So then like so then, yeah, like last week, my mom was cleaning out the freezer and she's like, Alydia, what are we gonna do with all these cookies? Because I made a batch that didn't turn out too well. I was trying to cheat and make tarts with cookie shells, and I put too much leavening agent, and it just made like I don't know what it made. So I often just put things in the freezer, and then and then in the night I'll be like, oh, I could grind that up and make like a trifle, or like something will come to me, and then if nothing comes to me by then, I've usually forgotten about it. But oftentimes I find if I do make a mistake, you could soak it in rum. You could soak it in like you could soak it in maraschino cherry juice,
Yeah.
and something good will come of it. Like
Okay.
but I do think two things, mate. There's nothing wrong with following a recipe and a script, particularly if you love it. And then but I'm sure there are ways that you make it unique. I'm sure there are ways that you either roll or bake it that make it unique. And I'm sure there are ways in your preparation that are unique to you.
Yeah, it's called OCD.
And sometimes just a little flat out superstition. Like, like, you know, like there are some things that I do, like I name my appliances and sometimes I'm like, I just need to give Jodeci a pat before I mix the batter, or she'll spit it at me. Like, like I have a couple superstitions that go with like my regular, but I do think it's totally okay to stick to a script, and it's totally okay when you're ready to veer outside of it. It's one of those things where if you know how it works, then you can continue to make it work. Like, so if I know what is making this cornbread work, I know what I can mess with and what I can't mess with. So sometimes it's simply about adding to the flavor profile. Like if I'm making chocolate is such a rich flavor. If I add coffee or almond, I know that that will help to deepen the flavor profile. So I know that those things will work together. So why not work it together in a cookie, as opposed to like being completely out there. Like I'm not one of those people who are going to be adding bacon to my cake, because like that's a really complex contrasting flavor profile. Like there is something about salty and sweet, but like you need to candy that bacon or something before you put it in. But if you're making something that you love and you know, and that you already know goes well, then you might think of like profiles. Like, so what might already be a natural partnering with this. Like for instance, I'm always the cornbread person in my house, and I have been since I was like 12. Like it's my job to make the cornbread. And for the first 10 years, I completely followed that recipe from that little wire-bound book that we always had. And then I started to substitute. I started with a simple substitution of like coconut milk for milk, or changing the fat, or changing the milk, or adding things that I already know go well, or that we already eat it with it. So we already eat our cornbread with coconut things. So why not just add it in already? So I think be courageous, but maybe start small and recognize the uniqueness of what you're doing by how you follow that recipe. Like,
okay, you lit the fire. God, you're making me salivate.
So much fun. It's so much fun once you get started. And then if you're really concerned, just half the batch. Like just start smaller. Like, and that way eat it yourself. As long as you're willing to eat it and you're not wasting.
I'll bring it to your freezer.
Exactly. Bring it to my freezer. I'll figure out something. In the middle of the night, it'll come to me. Oh, okay, I'm gonna make like a cornbread crumble. Like I have found so many ways to mask flavors of things that I've messed up. I've also found that the slow cooker is amazing. Like sometimes I've messed up a cookie or something or a muffin. I'll like put it in the slow cooker and turn it into oatmeal.
Oh,
Oh, gross to some people, but I'm eating it. It's okay.
well, very interesting. You're so multi-talented, I must tell you.
I can any other questions or wonderings of how you can create your crafter pieces? I think it's really about confidence and ownership, right? Like it's you don't need to be an expert at anything. Some things I think you'll naturally become an expert at because you love it so much. Like there are some things that you'll just like continue to do and you'll become an expert at it because you just want to figure it out. But I do think the important thing is to try and to own it and to be like, I made this and only I could have made it like this. And that's pretty cool. And it's pretty cool that you tried to make it. Like that's an amazing accomplishment in itself. So even if it looks like my mom made these pair of pants out of a skirt yesterday that look ridiculous. But she made it herself. Like that's pretty cool. And my grandma hasn't used a pattern since like maybe 1999. This woman just like sews from her head and I can't fathom it. I don't understand how she doesn't use a pattern and but she doesn't. And every once in a while she'll make something and she'll be like, it's just a muumuu. Like just wear it, just go with it. And then other times it's just like completely brilliant and it's beautiful and I love it because I know it can't be repeated and I know it's for me. Like my grandma, she doesn't sew that much anymore. She's in her late 90s and you know, her eyes and her fingers don't work in quite the same way, but she made me a bunch of like church outfits. She was like, "You're a church lady. You need more matching outfits." So she's made me a whole bunch of like matching blazers and suits that are just like so unique and I love them because only I have them and they were made by grandma with love. She's just like, "You're a church lady and the world needs to know it."
Oh,
And I love it. And I love it. So
Love it.
it's that sort of spirit. And I remember when I was younger, she used to make me and my doll matching outfits, which I always loved. So then I'll show you a couple of the things that my mom and I have been working on right now. Like, so this top quilt was for a dear friend of my mom and my grandma. So my Aunt Carmen, she died 3 weeks ago but during COVID, she had to go into a nursing home and we weren't able to visit and she wasn't able to have visitors. And she loved lap quilts. So she loved to kind of sit and have something over her lap. And her and my grandma, she would always, her and my grandma loved to go to Honest Ed's together. And when I was younger, I remember I would meet them at Warden Station and they would have gone to Bathurst together and they would hold hands the whole way.
oh.
And they'd have like this cart that they would fill with like Honest Ed things and they would say, "We're gonna go visit Uncle Ed." And then they would fill in all these things. So these fabrics made me think of that and the carts. And the hearts, there are 3 hearts for the Trinity there, and then there are 12 rays coming out of the hearts for the 12 apostles. And the varying crosses was because my grandma loves red and she loved blue and different colors and she was always so loving. So she always baked and cooked for my parents anytime anytime anyone was coming to pick up something, she would bake things for my parents, and she always bought things to put in for my grandma to put in barrels. So of course my grandma couldn't go to the funeral and I couldn't go to the funeral. So we thought it would be nice to create something that she could have with her. So this was with Carmen, like they in her coffin, so that she would have it with her. But because we couldn't be there, this was something that we created for her. And we were, unfortunately, like I was looking for the fabric beforehand. Like I was hoping that we were going to make her something, because I knew that she liked lap quilts and she liked to kind of have it on her when she watched Y&R. So that was the hope. And this was one of the things that we made in honor and in love for all of the wonderful things that is Aunt Carmen. And my mom and I aren't quilters, but by trade. Like, it's not something that we do often, but we really wanted to do this. And of course we picked like the most difficult thing. Quilting prints is annoyingly difficult to line up, but it was great practice. And like we didn't buy pre-cut fabric, and then like we cut it wrong. We had to pull out pieces a couple times, but all the more love, right? Like we're so proud of how it ended up, and how all those pieces line up to make it look like a solid in some parts, even though, you know, quilting plaid is never a good idea. But you start with the hardest and then it becomes easier. This is for a member of a committee that I'm working on who's having a baby very soon. So we're creating this baby quilt for her to go with the book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So I found this lovely piece of fabric and I just wanted to turn it into something to give with her with the book. And the border we created really is just trial and error design. Like, again, it would have been easier to use a pattern, but like, but I didn't. So that's what I'm currently sewing right now. I'm also sewing another quilt right now that I didn't take a picture of. And then a friend of mine, her daughter just has this doll that she loves, and I had these lovely scraps. So I made a doll quilt, and I also needed help practicing binding. I'm not very good at binding because I'm not very good at corners. Like, that's not my strength. So I wanted to practice binding. So I did a couple doll quilts to help me get the binding together. And the doll doesn't mind that the corners aren't straight. So it's a nice place to start. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now. And as you can see, it's often need or necessity based. It's kind of like, oh, this would be something that this person would really like. Let's figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then that's usually how we go. And then once we get started, it often adds more to. Like, my mom and I have just started to get into applique. And part of the reason we had gotten into applique was because I'm just going to download the picture here. Sorry, I thought I had downloaded it before. Because as you know, we really like to do aprons, partly because clearly we love to cook. And, and sometimes we have too much fun in the kitchen and we need the aprons. So my mom has a couple of friends from Barbados, and they were like, oh, we love your aprons. Could you make one for Barbados? So then, of course, we did. And to applique and the trident, like the other thing I should say is that my mom and my grandma were both also home ec teachers. Like, you know, there was like some basic, the sewing and the cooking and those kind of basic skills they already had in them. So we often know the theory for a lot of things. It's just that we haven't done it or applied it. So we started to get into making specialized aprons for friends or family who kind of wanted something specific. So my mom had made an apron for herself for Jamaica's independence, and then some friends saw it, and then they asked for one for Trinidad, they asked for one for Barbados and other places. So now we're getting into figuring out how to make aprons for different cultures and heritages based on what people have been asking for, which is kind of fun. And then the other thing that we've been getting into a lot more is my mom is a part of a seniors group with the Malvern Family Resource Center, and they have a lot of people with particularly dietary needs. So we've been doing a lot of like vegan milks and sugar-free cookies and all sorts of other things. So kind of using the knowledge that we have and being as resourceful as possible, figuring out how to best meet the needs of people in different communities. And it's been so much fun in the process. The other thing that we've been doing, oh, I meant to wear it, is we got into this kick before COVID of like repurposing clothes from Value Village. So making skirts from sweaters and leg warmers from like sweater arms, which has been really fun. And things to teach to children that they can do. So like making t-shirt bags and other things that are kind of easy, and so not easy, like anyone, like people can make them of varying skill sets, but are accessible so that you're setting yourself up for success. Like in truth, a lot of the times when my mom and my sister and myself start something, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure because we always like jump in at the deep end. We're like, we're just gonna make the macaroons. like, you know, we always just go for the hardest thing first. But when teaching to others, we go for the hardest thing first. But part of that is that like, there's this confidence that we've instilled with ourselves with this sort of crafter piece rule, like, right? Like, I know that even if I don't get it right, it's all right. Like, I'm going to learn something from it and I'm going to try again. Like not the other day, 3 years ago, I decided to make French macaroons with pumpkin seeds instead of almonds. Why did I do that? And I decided to like make pumpkin flour myself from scratch. Oh my goodness, these things did not turn out at all. But like, but I added some sugar and I ate it. Like, it tasted all right in the end. But like the trying of things is so liberating, and it's so exciting to see what possibilities could come. And I think it's so humbling and helpful for me in the rest of my life, right? Like the knowledge that I can do something and it might not turn out, and that's totally okay. Like it has no, the fact that this doesn't turn out has no regard on my sense of self or my self-worth, or like, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not a crafter. No, like it's pretty set in stone that I'm crafty. Like we all know that Alydia is a bit of an artsy fart. So like the fact that I like can't always sew in a straight line doesn't bother me, because I know that I can like do it, and I know that I can practice. And I try to put that in other areas of my life. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But like I do think it's a really valuable life lesson that I particularly try to instill in children and youth that I'm working with or teaching crafts to, that crafting can be a real help in self-esteem building and confidence building and problem solving for life, that our end product isn't necessarily a result of who we are and doesn't judge us, but how we present it, and the pride and confidence that we have in it, I think says a lot more, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like this might not be beautiful to you, but it's beautiful to me because of this, and this, because I used what I had, because I made it, because like I was really kind to myself when I made all those mistakes in there, and I was really supportive. And because I put a lot of effort into it, this is beautiful to me. And like to have that sort of confidence, I think is a wonderful thing that I kind of wish I had articulated to myself in my teen years, right? Like I had it with art, but I didn't necessarily have it with other things. Like, so I didn't think that I was a good enough drawer for certain things, or I didn't think I was a good enough musician for certain things. But like, if I had thought of it in terms of what is my unique art that I'm sharing and how am I going to do that, I think it would have been it would have saved me a lot of heartache. So I really do hope to share that with others as well. Like the kind of you do you and you do it really well and you do it with integrity and like be proud of that and be proud of the effort. Like the effort to do something that you're not good at is huge in a world that's always trying to like show the best and the shiniest. Like the fact that you're trying to do something even though you know that you're not great at it, hey man, that's really cool. And kudos to you for putting in the effort.
Mhm.
And that's what I hope to instill in people when we're crafting. And I know that there are some things that we do that are particularly my mom and my sister. Like my mom and my sister are exceptional artists. So there are some things that they do that are phenomenal and we know it. And that's so exciting. And then there are other things that aren't that great. And that's okay. And we don't always sell, we don't like we have a high bar. So we don't sell the things that aren't great. We only sell the things that we think are great. But that's so awesome. Like it's neat that we have like a whole basement full of crap that we can keep on repurposing and recycling. That was the I'll open it up for questions again, but the other thing I did want to say too was one of the things that my friend and I, Jess and I, when we go out and like talk to Girl Guide troops and things like that, our name, so I have many avenues that I craft in. So there's the Craftsmiths, which is like my family, and we do craft shows and like craft sales and things like that. And then Buttons and Tape is just like another friend and myself who teach crafts to people who want to learn a craft. So like, you know, we'll go into a group and teach them how to do like monogram names or sewing bags or something like that. And in both of those spaces, one of the key things we also try and share with people is to have inspiration on the ready. So be resourceful. Like, so we often suggest people have like a craft box or something, like, you know, have something where you can stash something where you're like, ooh, that would be really cool to make something with, but I don't know what. Put it in a little box and like have some other supplies there, something sticky, like, you know, tape, glue, something erasable, so that something kind of pretty, like have like some basic craft supplies there so that when you're ready, you can go and grab it, because there's nothing worse than like having inspiration and then being like, oh, I can't bother because then I need to go and clean off my kitchen counter and then I need to go and do this and I need to go and do that. And by the time I get all the pieces together, I'm not in the mood anymore. But like if you have a little box with like some of the things on the ready, then you can kind of pull it out and then pull it back. And I found that has been helpful for me in like kind of those sporadic inspirations that I can like, I used to in my condo, I had a little filing cabinet that was just like my crafting station that I could literally wheel out if I had like 30 minutes of inspiration and then push it back, which is so helpful.
Well, that's exciting, Alydia. You truly inspire many of us. You remind me of a few adventures I did along the way of different things. And I remember trying to take 50 pounds of flour and turn it into pasta. Well, it was a bit like lead weight in the bottom of a ship, and somehow the recipe didn't quite work out. And then I tried it. A friend of mine, she had known how to make strudel with her Slovakian grandmother. Again, we took 50 pounds of flour, and we had tank armor on a dining room table, so it was a bit of a trip. But, you know, it was a good adventure. You know.
One time I was making gluten-free red velvet cupcakes, and I hit a record. I got to 100. I made 100 different cupcakes before I got like the perfect gluten-free red velvet cupcake, and one of the batches I made, I dropped one by accident and it bounced.
Oh, I love it.
It was a bouncing cupcake.
The Indian rubber cupcake. Wow. Love it. Okay. That's good. Any other questions from people? No?
Or any other things that inspire you that you'd like to share? Like, what are you working on? That's exciting. Who was that?
Oh, I'm still working on a comfort shawl using this.
Oh, lovely. I have a comfort shawl that someone made me here that I just love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the, what you say is, getting the momentum to actually try it. We've got this idea that a lot of us, that if it's mine, it's not going to be any good. And that's just like, no, it's fine.
Exactly. It's yours. Like, how could it not be great? You made it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny because we use that often when talking with children. Like, no one would ever say to a 6-year-old, that's not a great picture. Like, that would be.
Sure they would.
Sorry?
What do you say, Carolyn?
They're always criticized.
Yeah. Yeah, like, and the thing is that you wouldn't think of criticizing a younger person because you realize that part of the job of crafting and creating is playing, right? Is of kind of figuring out and having fun with it. So it's not about critiquing, but we've come to a place where we're used to being critiqued that it's hard. Like that kind of the L of the rule of being loving is hard sometimes because there's so many things that we judge our work against. And that's the part that I think is unique about the crafter piecing, right? Is about being loving to other creators, but also being loving to yourself. Like,
I think we're our worst critic.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we are definitely. And I think I've learned something today, even though I came in late, Alydia, not to be so self-critical and wanting to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. And I've been YouTubing a lot, and these crafters out there says, hey, so you made a mistake, put something on top of it, and then you can't see it. Yeah. So I'm learning to do that. And just because I know it's there, but nobody else knows it's there. But the point was, I know it's there. It's wrong. It's not perfect.
I know. But the thing is that nobody else knows it's there. Like, I'm gonna, hold on a second here. Like I'll tell you here, like in this quote right here, I totally bunged up that corner where the heart is. Like, ask me what I did. I don't know, but it doesn't work. So I like put another piece on it, partly because I didn't use a pattern, so it didn't line up. So I needed to add another piece of blue, but you would never know with the heart over it. The same thing with one of these, like the corner is completely messed up, but then I patched it up and no one would know. Or in this one, it's off in the center, but then again, I trimmed the whole thing and then put a bigger border around it to cover up the mistake. And I learned from it. So I feel like it's all good. And I agree, like particularly when we're doing shows, there's always a batch of something that each of us refuses to sell, and the other one's like, why? It's perfectly fine. And we completely respect when someone says, no, that's not up to the standard. But then it's funny to me how baffled everyone else is about it. Like, I remember once I had a batch of cookies and I was like, yeah, this isn't going. And then my sister and my nephew were like, no, sell it. And I'm like, no, I won't. And then they ate it with great joy. Like, but you're absolutely right. We are our toughest critic. And in truth, I would hope that we would get to a place where we are our fiercest cheerleaders. Like there's a difference between critiquing and coaching, right? Like when I can see a mistake and learn from it and get better at my craft because of it, or when I see a flaw or a fault and then get down on myself because of the flaw and fault. Like I prefer to try and frame it as a mistake that I'm trying to improve upon, and as to be my own coach and cheerleader as opposed to being my own judge and critic.
Mm-hmm. I had a book on knitting, and it had little interesting facts, and it was this one place the knitters deliberately put a mistake in their piece just to know that, you know, this is made by people. Perfection only exists, you know, outside of Earth. So
yeah, I love that. It's sort of like space for grace.
Yes.
Like, you need to leave a little space for grace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love that. And proof that it's made by like a person. Like
Alydia, you are truly a Renaissance person. I mean,
Yes.
remarkable on every corner. I love it. So, so next time we have you come back, we'll have to have you. You have to show us what you're doing.
Oh, for sure.
You've done
Yeah,
1,000 different things.
yeah, sorry about that. It's just because it's in the basement and I can't.
So one thing I can do, I can help you. I'll take about 30 of your photos and we'll create a TikTok thing, and then they'll come. It's called Alydia on the Move.
Sounds good. It sounds good. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, everyone. It's been remarkable. And then Susan, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was amazing. Next week, we have Bob Vernon talking about Syrian refugees, a time for sponsorship. And that's very appropriate right around now, where there's a local family needing sponsorship that we're trying to help. So I hope you can be there and connect with us then. Take care.